Hey Wargamers, welcome back to the channel, Death from Above Wargaming. I'm Aaron and I'm back tonight with another Battlytics mech review. This time we're going to take a look at something coming out of the Kickstarter. So excited, just got my email tonight actually, and so that should be coming very soon. We heard end of October I think, so getting close finally. So tonight we're going to look at the Valkyrie. This is a tough little 30-ton mech, been around for a long time, one of the unseen. Again, you know, just very, very quintessential light mech here. Pretty tough. It's got a medium laser, an LRM-10, but we're going to compare it directly to that Clan era refit, the Lostech upgrade. So we're going to be looking at the QA versus the QD. Now the QD takes on an Artemis system, swaps out that medium laser for a medium pulse, and then adds case as well. They're both within 80 battle value, so it's just a very small cost increase for what you get. But does that Lostech pay off? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. We're going to find out. Guys, stay tuned. Valkyrie Lostech Comparo coming right up. Alright guys, here we are. Let's dive into this Valkyrie comparison and see if this Lostech is worth that extra battle value. So we're going to start with the Valkyrie QA. So this is a 30-ton mech, as we talked about, coming in the Kickstarter in Wave 1, very exciting. So this is an Intersphere mech built in 2787. So this is way back in the day, and it has persisted all the way through the BattleTech timeline. Even in its sort of lower technology form, you can find it in the field all the way into the Dark Age. Likely because it is easy to maintain, all standard components, basic fusion engine, nothing too fancy going on here. Now this mech has very, very good armor coverage for a light mech. I think of this as sort of like, in my mind, right, like this is the mech I'd put my light lance commander in or my recon commander in. It's not very fast. It does have jump jets though, so it moves at 585, and it again packs that LRM-10 and a medium laser with just 1 ton of reloads. Now the Valkyrie QD was refitted in 3049, or basically built in 3049 after the rediscovery of the lost technology via the Helm memory core. So this mech has a battle value of 807, just slightly more than that Valkyrie QA, and this one packing ferrofibrous armor and endosteel, but thankfully still a standard engine. We've seen it in the past, those XL engines, even on the Clan designs, they really do lead to a lot of early game fatalities, and on a mech of this size, even with 100% armor coverage, I feel like it would be a death sentence. So I was very excited to see that this just had a standard fusion engine, and again has those other components, endosteel and ferrofibrous, to basically free up some tonnage. What does it do with that tonnage? Well, it adds Artemis to the LRM-10, adds a case system to protect that LRM ammo, and upgrades that medium laser to a medium pulse laser. So it does suffer a little bit with range as far as the medium pulse laser goes. It does, of course, drop it basically 3 full hexes, and I'm not a big fan of it, to be quite honest with you. I think I prefer a standard medium laser, but that -2 hit bonus is also very good, especially when you're fighting small mechs that are zipping by you, locusts, you know, claiming a +4 target mod and things like that. So it could prove, I think, in this particular situation, worth its weight. Okay, so let's check out how these mechs stack up in terms of offensive capabilities. All right, here we are, the offensive analysis. It's adorable. I actually had to rescale the y-axis. Normally it goes up to 60 points of damage. I rescaled it down to 10. These things really do not pump out a whole lot, as you would expect. They've got a variable damage, you know, LRM-10, right? You don't know how much you're really going to do, and you've just got a medium laser or a medium pulse. So you're not really looking at this thing to churn out a ton of damage. It really is an anti-light mech type of platform, in my opinion. So looking at the damage, what do you see? Well, both of the mechs very similar. That QD already paying dividends with the Artemis system. You can see where the more transparent area, which represents the QD, begins to eclipse the QA almost, well, actually immediately, starting at 21 inches when that LRM comes into range. It actually dips down a little bit because that medium laser comes into play at 9 inches. So the QA for just at that range bracket, that one turn, it can outperform the QD, but everywhere else basically, you know, the QD, as soon as that medium pulse comes into play, the QD is doing phenomenally better. Another important thing to note here, there is no ability for this mech to build up heat. Now that's just when we're talking about, you know, walking and firing weapons. Obviously when you bring those jump jets into play and it has 5 of them, you can build up heat pretty quickly. So in some regards, I think having a little bit of capacity here is a good thing, especially because I think you will be firing those jump jets a lot on this mech. If you're fighting other light mechs, you're going to need that added mobility because they're going to be so much faster. So in that regard, I didn't really mark that as a strike. Again, I think that extra heat capacity here, probably a good thing. Well, they're not very lethal, that's for sure. We talked about that on the offensive simulation. There's just not a ton going on. You know, kind of just taking a quick look back at the numbers, 52.7 on the Valkyrie QA for the ACD, whether it's baseline, optimized, or redline, and 61.3 for the QD. So when you're doing that kind of damage over 12 turns, you really shouldn't have high expectations of murder here. This thing really has trouble bringing down the Javelin. The Javelin, incidentally, also a 30-ton mech. But the Valkyrie, as you can see, that the kill curve, the time to kill, 28.4 turns, and that's if you extrapolate the damage. I actually think that those numbers are much worse because the lethality index, when it gets beyond 12 turns, it just sort of forgets about ammo. You know, again, once you're over 12 turns, it's a guess at best. So, and even in this regard, you're probably running out of ammo. You are most likely after turn 12 because you only have 12 rounds. And so you're just relying on that medium laser or that medium pulse laser. It's going to take a really long time to melt armor with that thing. So as you can see here, really not very lethal. Just 4.2% kills on the QA, 6.3% on the QD. So, you know, you could say the QD is 1.5 times-ish, you know, more lethal, but really these numbers are so abysmal. You're just going to hope for a lucky shot. I mean, really, this is a pack hunter. You need to group this in with other mechs and just basically pile on to something. I think that's why the Artemis is so useful here and the medium pulse laser is so useful here. Again, sort of helping you to land more damage on those harder to hit mechs. Let's take a look at the defense. Okay, so let's talk through this here. I did create a couple of visualizations here, or I should say revisualized a couple of things, just to kind of make it a little more clear as to what was happening. So survivability curve remains the same in terms of the visualization. And you can clearly see that the QD, it does have more armor. We saw that courtesy of the ferrofibrous. It was able to pack out to 100%. And so, you know, it does pretty well. But remember, guys, this is against an awesome. Okay, so if you look at this, I mean, these things are doing really, really well up until about turn 8, turn 9, where you start seeing them plunge to doom. But I mean, this is impressive. This is a 30-ton mech against an awesome, you know, charging in, and it's doing very well. If you can keep this mech at range for a while, you could expect better numbers. I was actually pretty impressed with the survivability of these mechs. So overall, you know, 33.2% was the cumulative on the Valkyrie QA, 47.3% on the QD. But again, these are really good numbers for a 30-ton mech. So the death analysis is one of those visualizations that I redid. The multiple line chart just wasn't doing it for me. So this is a stacked bar. Basically, the more translucent bars, the ones on the right of each series represent the QD. The more opaque ones on the left represent the QA. And what you can see here is in the stack, there's really not a lot of ammo kills, not a lot of engine deaths. In fact, in the QD, there's 0% ammo deaths courtesy of case and the fact that there's no XL engine, right? That combo is nonsense. It doesn't matter if you have a left torso cased if you've got 3 engine criticals in that torso, because you're pretty much going to die anyway. But the QD can survive side torso destruction and still keep chugging, so it had 0% deaths attributed to ammo, which does help with its overall survivability, by the way. And you can kind of see that, right? You can see the trends, they're very similar. All right, so the other thing here is ammo critical chance by location. So the chance that you're going to hit the ammo is the same The torso sections are packed out equally with hittable critical locations. The only main difference, again, that QD having case. Now, if we look at the armor diagram in the center, for a 30-ton mech, I'll take either one. 100% obviously is phenomenal. It is actually, interestingly enough, the QD is what I would call over-armored on the front of its torsos and under-armored a little bit on the rear. I mean, the rear is not bad by any means, but the front, typically it's like a 75-25 distribution, but, the QD is a little higher. And honestly, for a mech with jump jets and high speed, I think I would prefer that. It's very unlikely that you're going to have this thing in a city brawl where, you need a ton of armor in the back, but just keep that in mind. Both of these mechs, really, you really want to avoid having mechs in that rear arc, and I believe the QA actually has the same situation going on there, just a little more noticeable on the QD. So mobility analysis here, we've talked a lot about mobility. These things can do very well. The Valkyrie QA, again, +3 target mod, courtesy of that 8 speed at run speed, right? QD, same deal. Both of them have jump jets, which is going to help them keep that target modifier up if they take a leg critical or something along those lines. Their speed is reduced from heat, whatever it might be, they can fire those jump jets and maintain that +3. So when we look at the target mod degradation over time, the QA is actually much lower than the QD. 1.2 versus 1.8. You notice even in the bottom, the motive critical susceptibility analysis, the QA far more susceptible to critical hits. So I looked at the critical slots. Sometimes that's because the crit slots aren't packed out. It only has the 4 actuators and then 2 roll agains. Both of these mechs packed out fully, 6 of 6 hittable criticals, which does help with maintaining mobility. It just came down to the fact that the QA had less armor. And at these small volumes of armor, every couple of points makes such a huge difference to how fast you get into the internal structure, how many criticals you're rolling, how fast that leg gets blown off. That's all a big factor here. And so that's why you see the QD being able to survive a little bit more. And that's about it on the mobility. But both of these mechs, I think, doing very well. Nothing too notable there, but just interesting to see how, from a simulation perspective, when it's going up against that awesome that's taking chunks of armor out at a time, those extra couple of points of armor really can make the difference. All right, here it is, the efficiency benchmark. So we looked at survivability, we looked at the basically the damage curves. The survivability really not affecting the damage too much, but again, because it has such a small amount of damage, everything by percent looks ginormous. So it's basically a 21.6% damage loss for the QA, a 17.9% damage loss for the QD, and that basically is looking at the damage, looking how the survivability curve basically sits, and then multiplying those things together and figuring out the difference. So when you factor in survivability versus if you were alive 100% of the time, you're basically down 21.6% on the QA, and again 17.9 on the QD. So overall, those are not terrific numbers. Around 10% is what you like to see. That's pretty standard. But again, small damage, even a couple of points of 60. 6 points out of 60 is 10%. So anyway, I digress. Let's look at the efficiency rating. So both of these mechs for 30-ton mechs, really not bad. The QA at 4.08, the QD at 4.45. They just don't do the damage. That's what it comes down to. They just don't have that level of output. I think they're still great mechs, but again, they're trading firepower for armor. And some of that firepower is in the form of a very heavy LRM-10. You might have done better with, for example, an LRM-5 and a few more medium lasers or something along those lines. You'd be able to churn out some more damage. Again, we saw you could not push this mech, had no ability to take on heat unless you're jumping, firing everything, so on and so forth. So it is what it is. As far as gunnery sensitivity goes, I thought this was interesting, the QA versus the QD. So the QA actually had a higher gunnery sensitivity, which means it responds more to a better pilot, to a lower skill gunner. Why? Well, you've got the pulse laser and you've got the Artemis system. And so, those things really help you churn out extra damage regardless. The -2, especially on the pulse laser, makes such a big difference there. So that's kind of how that shakes out. Now, what does that leave us with? Well, it leaves us with the role analysis and the threat analysis. So we'll start with the QA first, then we'll look at the QD. Okay, so the QA, again, not a whole lot going on here. No ability to push this thing for heat. You can see those yellow triangles on the top chart just pegged right along the axis there. There's just no ability to build up heat. Its threat envelope is not bad. Again, it's got decent range with the LRM-10. You can torso twist it. You can get decent arc of fire. You have a little bit with the laser mounted on the right arm. But overall, it's not like it's got a really, full 360-degree firing arc, or, it's, again, limited weapons. And if you lose one, you're in trouble. So where does this thing shake out? Well, let's look at some of the key metrics. Our peak zero heat ACD, which is the same as our max ACD, is 7.5 at 6 inches. That's where this thing is going to do the most damage on average at 6 inches. Its peak alpha strike is 15 points of damage. That's at 9 inches. And that's, again, that's basically the earliest it can hit with that medium laser. And so if you hit with all your lasers, or all your missiles and your laser, I should say, you're going to do 15 points of damage. So nothing crazy there with the rocket science. So for roles, what I'm looking at here is 3 that come to mind. The first one, cavalry. It can get across the field pretty quickly. It has great survivability, so it can take those shots on the way in. Again, decent mobility with those jump jets. It can clear obstacles. It can get to an objective quickly. Not my first choice. Secondly is fire support. So there are not many mechs in the 20 to 30 ton range that have an LRM-10 or that have, big missiles. And I'm sort of forgetting about anything in the advanced eras. We're talking about in these eras, up to the early clan invasion, and not clan mechs, obviously, because everything weighs half as much, basically. So there are not a lot of light mechs of this size. So you drop an LRM-10 on something like a Wasp or a Stinger or a Locust or a Commando, you're going to deliver some serious hurt here. So I feel like this could play a fire support role, although again, it's limited. Probably the best role for this mech is a skirmisher. You can kind of fade it in and out of that 9-inch bracket. You can dump in some LRMs. You can work that medium laser in at long range. I thought about maybe second line, like you hang back and then you go in for cleanup, but it's really an interesting mech. In retrospect, maybe I should have picked a Picket as a good role. But again, it's got that LRM-10, so it's sort of a weird combo. I think it's a great all-purpose mech. It's probably a good commander mech, as I had said in the beginning. But yeah, it's a little bit tough to sort of slot this thing in a specific role, sort of an all-purpose player. Let's look at the QD and see if that tells a different story. Okay, so the QD looks very similar. Some key metrics here on the right regarding our threat. So the peak zero heat ACD, which is the same as our maximum possible ACD, is 9 points of damage at 6 inches. So it's doing a little bit more. And again, it's at that 6-inch mark because that's right before the minimum range penalty of the LRM basically matches medium range, right? Because it goes up by 1. And then, so you can still do decent damage with that LRM-10, but the peak alpha strike is 16 at 6 inches, so it's 3 inches less, or 3 hexes if you play on the hex maps, right? Then the QA, and it's only 1 point more of damage, so that's sort of interesting. But the damage over time does add up quite a bit. Again, we saw 52.7 on the QA, 61.3 on the QD. So even though those lethality, so lethally, right, or threat-wise, right, it's not much different than the QA, interestingly enough. Just over time, you're going to get a little bit more damage, but it's really not that much, 9 points or whatever. So when we look at the threat envelope, it's actually a little bit worse than the QA. Again, that pulse laser having a truncated range over its sort of standard medium laser cousin. So that kind of hurts a little bit. You really can't reach out and ping somebody. They have to be right up your gut in order to hit them with that pulse laser. And then that paired with an Artemis LRM-10, sort of an interesting thing there. So for this mech, I picked the same roles. I really, again, you know, maybe a Picket mech. I struggled with all of these guys. I gotta be honest with you. I stared at this for like an hour. I was like, what should I do with this? You know, I thought about Picket, I thought about Skirmisher, thought about second line, thought about fire support, thought about cavalry. I left it in those same 3 roles because I think cavalry is pretty much how you'd play this mech. You'd run in, you'd be firing your LRMs, you'd get in close, you pound stuff with your pulse laser, you try to get in a circle of death with another light mech and finish it off, hopefully, with some support from your buddies. But, you know, again, this is sort of an all-purpose mech. It's very interesting. I don't think it fits the mold because, again, it's got that very strong LRM-10, but limited to 12 turns, 12 rounds of ammo. And then it's got these medium lasers, either a regular or a pulse variety. So sort of an interesting mech in that regard. But I really like it. You know, again, from an efficiency rating perspective, it wasn't, if I recall, that far behind the Kit Fox, which is a much more expensive mech. You know, clan design, a lot of weapons, but these things are cheap. They're excellent to put in a lance. You know, very good, very solid buy. And, you know, honestly, QA or QD, I'm not sure you can go wrong either way. I wouldn't say the QD is absolutely a bargain for what you're getting. I think they're basically about the same. The QD does see a little bit of uptick in efficiency, but, you know, again, in practical terms, that reduction in range for that medium pulse laser is tough. If you have a better pilot to stick in the mech, the QA might be better overall. So, you know, we'll leave it up to you guys. You guys decide what you want. Either way, you can get this mech, if you're looking for it in metal form, over at Ares Games and Minis. Just reach out, get in touch with Derek, order right on the website there. The original model, very cool. And also, guys, the new one coming in the Kickstarter, Ares Games and Minis will be stocking those as soon as they are available. A lot of the vendors were able to buy into like the merchant cast or whatever it was called. So they will likely have stock. So keep your eyes open for that. Not sure how far out that will be, but no doubt Ares will have all that great stuff for you as well. But guys, that wraps up this mech review of the Valkyrie. Rounding out yet some more light mechs here on the docket. Don't forget, you can check out all of these mechs and more on the website, www.battlytics.com. You can head on over to our website, dfawargaming.com, for a whole ton of free resources. And guys, if you want to help us out, please click that subscribe button. 50% of you that watch our stuff have not subscribed yet. It really helps the channel. That would be a great thing to do if you could subscribe right now if you haven't already. Thank you. And guys, of course, stay tuned. Always great stuff coming from From Above Wargaming. Have a great night.